Dad, seriously? You forgot my birthday again? She wasn't even trying to hide it. Her voice was sharp, mocking, as she looked at me with that look, half irritation, half disbelief. The kind of look you give someone when you can't believe they could forget something so important. I froze for a second, trying to piece together what she meant. My mind had been a blur all morning, filled with 1,000 things I didn't want to remember, things I couldn't push out of my head. But no, I hadn't forgotten her birthday. How could I forget? I'd raised her, cared for her, tried to be there for her in every way I could, but I didn't say anything, because I knew that if I said anything, it would just make things worse. She wasn't angry. She was amused by the fact that I, her father, had become someone so forgettable, so insignificant, that she felt she could laugh at my expense. But what she didn't know, what she had no idea about, was that I hadn't forgotten. I was there this morning, at her mother's grave. I couldn't tell her that. Not then. Not now. I could barely admit it to myself. But I had gone there to say goodbye, once again, to the woman I loved and lost. To her mother, who, for all the mistakes I made, loved me in ways I could never repay. Her grave was quiet, peaceful, a stark contrast to the chaos I'd felt inside when I stood before it. The only sound was the wind rustling through the trees, whispering something I couldn't catch. But I had to leave. I couldn't stay. I needed to see my daughter, needed to make sure she was okay, even though I knew, deep down, she wasn't. I had barely made it to the house when she walked in. Her face was still stuck on that expression. Mockery, amusement, like she was laughing at a joke no one else could hear. I didn't say anything to her. I couldn't. Not after what I had seen. It wasn't just forgetting a birthday. It was the laughter, the dismissal, the way she acted like I didn't matter. The way she'd looked at me earlier, like I was an inconvenience to her busy, perfect life, like I was a burden. And I knew it was more than just a bad day. I could feel it in my bones, the emotional distance, the coldness in her voice, the way she didn't even try to hide her annoyance with me. It wasn't a one-time thing. It was becoming something permanent. But still, I said nothing, because I didn't want her to know. I didn't want her to understand what I was going through, what I had lost, how much it hurt. She'll never know that this morning I visited her mother's grave. That's what kills me the most. The things she'll never understand. It's like she's already forgotten, and that's the thing I can't shake. Maybe I was wrong to hope, to think that time would heal. But this wasn't just about a birthday. It was about a lifetime of memories, of grief, of a relationship crumbling right before my eyes. As I sat there watching her laugh at my forgetfulness, a question nagged at me. How had we gone from a father and daughter, close and full of life, to this? How had I become invisible to her? And the hardest part? I don't think I'll ever get an answer. Every year, without fail, I go. It doesn't matter what the weather's like. Doesn't matter if it's a blistering hot summer day or a freezing cold morning. I still go, and it's always the same. The path leading to her grave, worn down by time, is just as it was the year before, and the year before that. I've walked it so many times, I can close my eyes and still know every step. But this time, it felt different. The chill in the air cut through my jacket more sharply than I remembered. I could feel it in my bones, sharper than the wind outside. I've been growing weaker these days. My legs tremble when I stand too long. The effort it took to get to her grave today left me winded. My hands, once strong, are now stiff and ache constantly. And when I bend down to clean off the gravestone, I can't help but notice how much harder it is to get back up. I wasn't as quick as I used to be. I rested for a moment, my knees pressing into the damp ground. The stones beneath my fingertips were cold, but they didn't feel as cold as my heart did. I remembered the last days she spent with me. She was so frail then, her hair falling out, her voice barely a whisper. I watched as the woman I loved, who had been everything to me, withered away. I held her hand as she struggled to breathe, her eyes still holding on to something, some final piece of strength to leave a word or a smile. I promised her I'd keep going. I promised her I'd be okay. But I wasn't okay. It's been 3 years now. 3 years since I stood in that hospital room, holding her hand as she slipped away. And I thought, maybe, just maybe, the pain would dull with time. But it doesn't. It hasn't. As I stood there, my back aching, staring at her name engraved on the stone, I couldn't help but think about my daughter. I hadn't seen her in months. Her visits had become fewer and fewer, and even the phone calls had stopped coming. When they did come, they were brief, impersonal. There was a distance in her voice, something cold, something that didn't sound like the girl I used to know. I tried to reach out, tried to be there, but it always felt like I was burdening her. I wonder if she even remembers that I'm still here, still breathing, still thinking about her. But standing in front of my wife's grave, I realized just how far apart we'd grown. My grief didn't seem to matter anymore. To her, I was just another weight, just another responsibility she didn't want. And the worst part? I think she's forgotten the man who stood by her mother's side through it all. As I looked down at the gravestone, I couldn't help but ask myself, when did we become strangers? When did I stop being her father, and she stopped being my daughter? It's a question I can't answer. What rituals do you keep for those you've lost? What do you do to remember them when it feels like everyone else has forgotten? It started off small, almost like a joke. Dad, did you forget again? She was holding a stack of papers in her hands, flipping through them casually, as if she hadn't noticed I hadn't even glanced at the words. She tossed one sheet onto the table, her fingers tapping impatiently as she waited for me to sign it. I wasn't sure what it was, but I could tell it wasn't anything important. At least, not to me. It was some sort of document, some form that I'd never seen before. I need you to sign this, Dad, she said, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. Just the usual stuff, you know. Nothing to worry about. Nothing to worry about. I didn't think much of it at first. I've always been a little forgetful, sure. But then again, who wouldn't be after everything I've gone through? The years, the endless responsibilities, the late nights by her mother's bedside. I'm not as sharp as I used to be. But this wasn't the first time she had asked me to sign something like that. I'm handling everything for you, Dad. You don't need to stress about it, she added, her tone more insistent this time. There was something in the way she said it, a tone I couldn't quite place, like she was just a little too eager, just a little too confident that I wouldn't question it. I could feel the unease creeping in, a cold tightness in my chest. Something wasn't right. A few days later, she brought more papers. Dad, I really need this signed today, she said, sitting across from me, eyes avoiding mine. I could see her foot tapping beneath the table, a nervous habit I hadn't noticed before. Again, I didn't know what it was, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this was getting out of hand. And then came the phone call. It was a Sunday afternoon when she called, asking me about a home equity loan. I've looked into it for you, Dad, she said. We can pay off some of those old bills. Just need you to give me the go-ahead to sign off on this one. I had never asked for a loan. I hadn't even mentioned it. But she kept pushing, her voice sweet, insistent. I didn't understand it at first. Why was she so eager to take control of everything? Why was she asking me for things I hadn't even considered? But then I noticed the subtle shifts, the small ways she dismissed my questions, the way she acted like I was a burden. It wasn't just about forgetting. It wasn't just that I was getting older. It was something darker. And then I saw the slip of paper with the account numbers on it. When I asked her about it, she only smiled and waved it away. Just for your own good, Dad. You'll see. That's when I knew. Someone else was influencing her. Her partner, maybe. I didn't know who exactly. But I could feel the pull, the pressure building. They had been in my life long enough to know how to manipulate, how to turn things in their favor without me even noticing. It wasn't just care anymore. It was control. Have you ever seen someone try to manipulate a loved one in small, almost invisible ways? What did you do about it? I found the papers in the kitchen drawer. They weren't there before. I was sure of it. The papers I keep, my tax documents, old bills, the ones that matter, are always organized, tucked away in the top drawer, just like I've done for years. But when I opened it that afternoon, there they were, a stack of forms, most of them printed out, some with strange numbers and unfamiliar logos. The first thing I noticed was the signature at the bottom. It wasn't mine. I stared at it for a long time, trying to make sense of what I was looking at. It wasn't just one paper. It was a whole stack. Financial documents, some with account numbers and withdrawal requests. But I hadn't signed any of these. I hadn't authorized anything like this. I could feel my heart race in my chest. My hands started to shake. Dad, are you looking through my things again? I turned around, and there she was. Her voice sounded casual, but there was a sharp edge to it. She had that same look in her eyes, the one she'd had when I asked about the papers earlier. A quick flash of annoyance before she masked it with a smile. What is all this? I asked, holding up the papers. My voice was steady, but my insides were anything but. Don't worry about it, she said, waving her hand dismissively. It's just some stuff I've been handling for you. You don't need to stress about it. But I wasn't buying it. I didn't sign any of this, I said, my voice low. Dad, you're confused again. she replied, her tone suddenly patronizing. You signed it weeks ago. Don't you remember? I wanted to believe her. I wanted to trust that this was just another one of my forgetful moments. But something in the pit of my stomach told me this wasn't right. I glanced at the documents again. There were bank transfers, large ones, and a strange loan application, all dated recently. The amounts were more than I could have forgotten, and none of it made sense. Her explanation didn't make sense either. It was a story full of holes, one I couldn't quite piece together. But the worst part? I knew she wasn't telling me everything. I could feel it. The laughter she had shared with me in the past wasn't the same anymore. It wasn't just a harmless joke. It was a mask, a way to cover up something much darker. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I knew what I had to do. I decided then, right in that moment, that I would quietly look deeper into this. I couldn't trust her anymore, not after what I'd seen. I would find out what was really going on. Would you confront her now, or gather evidence first? What's the right move when you start realizing the truth? I didn't know where to turn, but I knew I couldn't keep ignoring what was happening. The first person I decided to reach out to was my bank manager, David. I've known him for years, long before any of this started. He had always been the kind of person you could trust, someone who understood my finances and respected my wishes. So, when I asked him to take a look at my accounts, I hoped he could offer some clarity. Mr. Bennett, he said, his tone serious when he looked over the documents I had gathered. These withdrawals are concerning, very concerning. He showed me the transfers, the ones made under my name, but without my approval. You didn't authorize these, he said flatly. I can see here that they were processed with a power of attorney, but I don't have a record of you granting that authority. I nodded, the weight of his words sinking in. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. This was deliberate. They've been draining your account slowly, he continued, pointing to the amounts, but it's all being done with your name attached to it. I felt the blood drain from my face. I didn't know if I was angry or scared or both. I need to put a hold on these transactions, and we'll get legal involved, David added, his voice steady but with an underlying urgency. I'll send you the forms to dispute these charges, but you need to be aware. This isn't just a case of negligence. This looks like exploitation. Exploitation. The word hit me harder than anything else. It made it real. I left the bank in a daze, but I wasn't done yet. Later that week, I had a doctor's appointment. I'd been feeling the weight of the situation on my shoulders. Sleepless nights, stress, constant worry about what my daughter was doing behind my back. The doctor was a kind woman, one who had seen me through other health issues before. But this time, I wasn't sure I could mask how I felt. You look stressed, Mr. Bennett, she said as she checked my vitals, and you're carrying a lot of tension in your neck and shoulders. I hadn't even realized how much I had been carrying it, physically. The worry, the stress, the fear of what was happening to my own life. I tried to brush it off, but she wasn't having it. You're under a lot of emotional stress right now, she said, looking me in the eye. I think it's time you involve someone who can help you with this. I knew what she meant. She wasn't just talking about physical stress. She was talking about what was happening in my life. She could see the toll it was taking. She didn't come out and say it, but I knew she was hinting at more. She knew something was wrong. The realization hit me hard that day. It wasn't just a small issue. This was real. It was happening, and it was deliberate. I had to do something. I started documenting everything, every transaction, every phone call, every moment that felt off. I began to piece together the full picture, and it wasn't pretty. I couldn't do this alone anymore. I made the decision right then. I would involve legal authorities. This wasn't just a betrayal anymore. This was a crime. Have you ever had a professional step in to help you when you needed support the most? How do we rely on institutions to protect us when family betrays us? The call came early one morning. It was the investigator assigned to my case, Detective Reynolds, and his voice was calm but firm. We've reviewed everything, Mr. Bennett. You were right to bring this to us. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach, but also a strange sense of relief. I wasn't imagining things. This wasn't just my deteriorating mind or paranoia. There's been unauthorized activity, and it's clear this wasn't a mistake, Detective Reynolds continued. We're moving forward with this. I could hear the rustling of papers in the background, the tapping of keys. It all felt so official, so real. The first part of the process was done. The financial transactions, the false signatures, the transfers, all of it confirmed. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. We're going to speak to your daughter, he said. We'll need your help to track down all the evidence. We're going to put a stop to this." The words, "we're going to speak to your daughter," felt like a punch to the gut. The idea of turning her in, the person who had been my daughter for so many years, someone I loved unconditionally, it didn't sit right with me. I had known for a while that she was taking advantage of me. But hearing the detective say it out loud, hearing it confirmed by someone trained to handle these situations, was a different feeling entirely. I tried to prepare myself for what would come next, but nothing could prepare me for the conversation I had with her that afternoon. She came over, as usual, wearing that same polite, detached smile. But this time, it was different. I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her eyes darted around the room, avoiding mine. "Dad, you've really gone too far this time," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "What are you trying to say with all these accusations?" I didn't answer right away. I just looked at her, trying to process the sudden surge of emotions: anger, heartbreak, disbelief. How could she lie so easily? Act as if I was the one at fault here? "You know what you've done," I said, my voice steady but filled with the weight of everything I had discovered. "I know what you've taken. I have the proof. This isn't a mistake." She stiffened, and for a brief moment, I saw something flicker in her eyes. Fear, maybe. But she quickly masked it, slipping back into denial. "You're mistaken," she said, shaking her head. "I've been handling things for you, Dad. You've never been good with money. This is just what you wanted." I felt the bile rise in my throat. The blaming, the shifting of responsibility. It was all part of her defense now. She couldn't face what she had done, and so she made it my fault. I felt sick to my stomach, but the detective had already made the call. The case was in motion. The evidence was undeniable, and the law would take its course. I couldn't change what had happened, no matter how hard I wished I could. I had to face the truth, no matter how much it hurt. Do you think confronting a child legally is an act of bravery, or is it just heartbreaking? Would you do it? The courtroom was colder than I had expected, the kind of chill that cuts through you, no matter how many layers you're wearing. It wasn't just the temperature, it was the weight of what was happening. The walls felt like they were closing in as I sat there, waiting for my turn to speak. I had never imagined I'd find myself here, in this place, confronting my own daughter over what she'd done. The prosecutor, a tall man with sharp features and a calm voice, stood up and walked over to the table where the evidence was laid out. He glanced at me before turning to face the judge. "Your Honor," he began, "the evidence before us is clear. Mr. Bennett's daughter, Emily Bennett, has intentionally exploited her father for financial gain. Over the past several months, she has accessed his accounts without permission, forged his signature, and made unauthorized withdrawals totaling over $150,000. The words felt like they were echoing in my head. I couldn't believe it. Part of me still couldn't fully accept it, even after everything that had happened. But hearing it said aloud, in a courtroom, in front of so many strangers, it made it real. I had already provided my statement to the court, recounting the days I had spent struggling to understand what had been happening, what had gone so wrong. I had never thought my daughter could betray me like this. Emily sat there, looking uncomfortable, her gaze fixed on the floor. She hadn't looked at me once, not even when they showed the pictures of the withdrawals, images of my bank statements, the signatures that weren't mine, the trail of money that had led to her. Her lawyer tried to fight back, claiming it was a misunderstanding, that I was confused, that I didn't understand the full picture. But the evidence was irrefutable. I had kept records. I had all the documentation. The truth couldn't be hidden anymore. The judge looked at Emily for a long time, his face stern. "The court finds you guilty of financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. The law is clear, and your actions were deliberate, cold, and cruel." There was a moment of silence. I wanted to feel relieved, to feel like justice was finally being served. But it didn't come. The judge continued, "You will be sentenced to 5 years of probation, restitution to your father in the amount of $150,000, and mandatory counseling for elder abuse." The court takes this matter very seriously. It should have felt like victory, but all I felt was a heavy weight in my chest. I didn't want this. I didn't want to see my daughter suffer. I didn't want this to be the end of our relationship. But it was. I had no choice. The law had to take its course. As the gavel came down, I felt the loss of my daughter more deeply than I ever expected. There would be no reunion, no coming back from this. I had lost her, and no amount of restitution or probation could fix that. I sat there, numb, As I listened to the judge's words, my heart heavy with grief. Do you think the sentence was enough for what she did? What would you do if you were in my shoes? The birthday I'll never forget was the one where my daughter laughed at me. But what she didn't understand, what she could never understand, was that I hadn't forgotten. I didn't forget her birthday. I never could. I had just left her mother's grave that morning, standing in front of it as I always did, talking to her as if she could still hear me. I spoke to her about the life we had shared, about the family we built, and about the daughter we raised. I spoke to her about the years that had gone by and the years I'd lost. And then, with a heavy heart, I walked away. I walked away from her grave, but I didn't walk away from the memories. I never could. When I walked into the house later that day, my daughter greeted me with laughter, with mockery, as though I was just another forgetful old man. But I wasn't forgetful. I was grieving. I spent so much of my life focused on what I could do for my family, what I could do for my daughter. I spent years trying to provide, trying to be there, trying to be the father I thought she needed. But what I never realized, what I couldn't see, was how grief could change everything. Grief had distanced me from her. Grief had taken away the pieces of me that I used to be, the pieces that made me her father, the one who could teach her and guide her. And without that, she had nothing left but a man who was no longer what she wanted. What I've learned is that grief doesn't just take loved ones. It can take families too. It can hollow out the connection between two people, leaving nothing but emptiness in its place. When compassion is missing, when understanding is absent, there's nothing left but pain. And I had tried to be patient with her. I tried to be patient with the distance, with the coldness, but I couldn't keep forgiving it. I couldn't ignore what was happening anymore. So, when it came time to stand up for myself, to stand up for what was right, I did it. And I don't regret it. I don't regret the decision to take action, but I also don't celebrate it. I don't find joy in the punishment. I just find peace in knowing I did what had to be done. Justice was served, but it didn't heal the wounds. It didn't bring back the years we had lost or the bond we once shared. Now, I sit here, reflecting on it all, on the daughter I once knew, on the woman I've lost, and I wonder if one day she'll understand, if she'll ever see the man I was before the grief took its toll. But that's a question I can't answer. Would you forgive a child who mocked your pain, or walk away for good?